Zane had spent most of his life traveling from one planet to another. As a space explorer, he was used to facing the unknown. Yet nothing had prepared him for the journey to the distant planet of Xylothor. It wasn't just the advanced alien technology or the strange, shimmering landscapes of the planet that fascinated him. It was the Xylothi people, who had a secret so mysterious that it had intrigued scientists for centuries. The Xylothi had the ability to regenerate their memories every 10 years. At first glance, this seemed like an incredible gift, living without the burden of past mistakes or regrets. But as Zane would soon discover, it was a curse in disguise. The people of Xylothor lived in a cycle of forgetfulness, and they could never remember the years that passed. For most, this meant an endless loop of starting over again and again, never truly knowing the people around them or the history they carried. But it was their tradition, their way of life. Zane wasn't on Xylothor for science, though. He was there as part of a diplomatic mission, tasked with forging stronger ties between humanity and the Xylothi. The alliance was meant to strengthen trade routes, share knowledge, and ensure peace across the galaxy. Zane's first assignment was to meet the royal family, and among them, the youngest of the Xylothi rulers, the princess, ZyraHFY. It wasn't long after arriving on the planet that Zane was introduced to Princess ZyraHFY. He had heard stories about her, of course. The princess was a legend among the Xylothi. Beautiful, wise, and beloved by all who met her, ZyraHFY was more than just royalty. She was the future of her people. However, what most didn't know was the part of her life that she could never remember. Every 10 years, she forgot everything. Her family, her friends, even her kingdom. And as the years passed, this cycle only seemed to grow heavier. Zane stood in the grand hall of the palace, the light from the twin suns outside casting a warm glow on the marble floors. Princess ZyraHFY stood before him, her eyes bright but distant, as if searching for something that was always just out of reach. She greeted him with a calm, practiced smile. "Welcome to Xylothor, Ambassador Zane. It is an honor to meet you." Zane bowed respectfully. "The honor is mine, Your Highness." The moment she spoke, Zane knew there was something different about her. The way she carried herself, the subtle strength in her posture, it was as though she wasn't just a princess, but a symbol of something greater. Yet, there was also a sadness in her eyes, something that seemed to linger just beneath the surface. It was like she had known loss, though she couldn't remember when or why. They spoke for hours, discussing everything from the weather on Earth to the best farming techniques in their respective worlds. ZyraHFY's intelligence was undeniable, but Zane could tell that there was something off about her. He couldn't quite put his finger on it, but there was a sense of repetitiveness in her questions. As they parted ways that evening, Zane found himself puzzled. He had met countless leaders during his travels, but there was something unique about ZyraHFY. It wasn't just her beauty or her grace. It was the feeling of déjà vu, as if he had met her before. He didn't know why, but he couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't their first encounter. Over the next few days, Zane had more meetings with Princess ZyraHFY. Each time they spoke, he realized with growing concern that she didn't seem to recognize him. It was as though their conversations were starting over each time. At first, Zane thought it was just his imagination, but after the third or fourth time, he couldn't ignore it any longer. During their third meeting, they walked through the royal gardens. ZyraHFY asked the same questions she had asked him before, about Earth and its people, about his mission, and about his impressions of Xylothor. Zane answered them all with patience, though his heart grew heavy with every passing moment. She had forgotten him, just as the Xylothi people forgot everything once the decade ended. He had heard about this before, of course. The Xylothi memory cycle was a well-known fact. but experiencing it firsthand was different. To see someone so intelligent, so full of life, trapped in a never-ending cycle of forgetting, it was heartbreaking. And worse still, there was nothing Zane could do to break it. She couldn't remember the past, and he couldn't force her to. As the days turned into weeks, Zane became more and more disheartened. Despite his attempts to form a connection, each conversation felt like the first. Veyra's smile was always warm, her laughter always genuine, but it was as if they were strangers each time. There was no recognition in her eyes, no hint of their previous interactions. One evening, after another dinner together, Zane found himself alone in his quarters, staring out the window at the vast expanse of stars. He could see Xylothor's twin moons rising in the distance. The beauty of the scene did little to ease the ache in his chest. He had tried everything to make Veyra remember him, to leave her messages, to find ways to spark her memories, but it was futile. Every 10 years, the same thing would happen. She would forget. Yet, Zane couldn't walk away. He was bound to this mission, bound to this strange, beautiful world. And he was bound to Veyra, though she would never know it. He sighed and closed his eyes. Perhaps he was fooling himself. Perhaps there was no way to make her remember. But he refused to give up. Something told him that there was more to their connection than simple memory loss. Maybe he couldn't change her past, but he could make her present count. For 50 years he would stand by her side, reminding her of everything they shared, even if she could never remember. And so, Zane made a decision. He would dedicate himself to ensuring that no matter what, Princess Veyra would never truly be alone. Even if she forgot him time and time again, he would be there, because he remembered. And he always would. The years passed, and with each cycle, Zane's bond with Princess Veyra grew stronger. But it also became more difficult. Every 10 years, she would forget him. She would forget everything, their conversations, their laughter, their quiet moments in the royal gardens. It was as if the past simply didn't exist for her. And no matter how hard he tried to hold on to the memories, they slipped away from her like grains of sand through his fingers. Zane had come to realize that Veyra didn't just forget him, she forgot herself. Each time they met, she would rediscover her role as the princess, the future leader of her people. She would smile at him, ask the same questions, tell him how honored she was to meet him again. It was as if they were strangers every time, and Zane could never find a way to make her see that they had shared something far deeper than what her mind could hold on to. At first, Zane tried to remind her. He gave her keepsakes, small gifts, trinkets, even a journal filled with notes from their past meetings. He thought that maybe if he could somehow jog her memory, things would be different. But each time she looked at them, her eyes would remain empty of recognition. It was painful to watch, to see the one person he cared for more than anyone in the galaxy look at him with a blank stare. Despite all of this, Zane never gave up. He continued to visit Xylothor, traveling from Earth to the farthest reaches of the galaxy, each time hoping that something would change. With every visit, he would feel his heart grow heavier, and each time she forgot him, it felt like he was losing her all over again. But he had made a promise to himself. No matter how many times she forgot, he would always be there, just as he had been the first time they met. Zane spent his days wandering the halls of the palace, looking for ways to help the ZyraHFY people. As a diplomat, he was still fulfilling his duties, building bridges between the ZyraHFY and humanity. But his heart was no longer fully in it. His thoughts were always on Veyra, and he couldn't shake the feeling that their connection was more important than anything else he was doing. It was during one of his long walks through the palace that he first began to understand the true weight of what Veyra's memory loss meant. As he strolled through the grand corridors, he overheard a conversation between two members of the royal court. They spoke in hushed tones, unaware that Zane was nearby. "She forgets again," one of them said.
"The cycle is beginning anew." "Yes," the other replied, "but we cannot allow it to continue."
"The princess is the key to our future, but her memory loss keeps us trapped in the past. We need to find a way to break the cycle." Zane's heart sank as he overheard their words. He had known that the Xylathi people's tradition of memory resets was a deeply rooted part of their culture, but he had never understood just how dangerous it could be. Veyra's memory loss wasn't just a personal burden. It was a societal one. Her people were stuck in an endless loop, never able to move forward, never able to build upon the past. And yet, they seemed afraid to change it. He continued to listen, hidden in the shadows, as the conversation unfolded. "The prophecy is clear," one of them said. "If Veyra's memory ever surpasses the cycle, the entire civilization will crumble. We've lived for centuries under this rule, and if we break it, everything will fall apart." Zane's mind raced as he pieced together their words. The prophecy, the cycle, the fear of change, it all made sense now. Veyra's memory loss wasn't just an inconvenience. It was a fundamental part of the Xylathi way of life. And if she were ever able to remember beyond 10 years, it could spell disaster for her people. The very foundation of their society was built on the idea of forgetting, of starting anew with each cycle. Zane felt a wave of sadness wash over him. He had been hoping for years that he could somehow change this, that he could break the cycle for Veyra. But now he understood that doing so might not just hurt her. It could destroy everything the Xylathi had worked for. It was a choice no one should have to make. But still, he couldn't give up. He had seen something in Veyra that no one else had. She wasn't just a princess who ruled her people. She was someone with a heart full of love, of compassion, and of longing. She was a person, not just a symbol of her people's destiny. And Zane refused to let her live her life without truly knowing the depth of that love. He spent the next few years trying to understand the full scope of the Xylathi memory cycle. He pored over ancient texts, consulted with the brightest minds in Xylothor, and even spoke with the royal scholars. But each time he came close to finding a solution, something would stop him. The prophecy was too powerful, the fear of change too great. It seemed as if the entire galaxy had conspired to keep Veyra trapped in this endless loop, unable to escape the past. One day, as Zane sat in his quarters, staring at the stars outside his window, he received an unexpected message. It was from one of the Xylathi royal advisors, a woman named Kira, who had always been kind to him. The message was brief, but it carried a heavy weight. "Meet me in the royal archives. I have something important to show you." Zane's heart skipped a beat. Could this be the answer he had been searching for? Was there something in the archives that could change everything for Veyra? He made his way to the royal palace, his thoughts racing. When he arrived, Kira was waiting for him, her face solemn. Without a word, she led him into the archives, where the oldest and most sacred texts of the Xylathi were kept. There, hidden away in a dusty corner, she showed him a small, ancient device, something Zane had never seen before. "This is the key," Kira said quietly. "The device can alter the memory cycle, but it is dangerous. No one has dared to use it for centuries. It could either save the princess or destroy everything." Zane's mind whirled as he examined the device. It was unlike anything he had ever seen, made of a strange material that seemed to glow with an inner light. The air around it felt charged, as if it held the power to change the very fabric of time itself. "Is this the way to break the cycle?" Zane asked. Kira nodded slowly. But it is a gamble. If you use it, there is no telling what will happen. Vera may remember everything, but there could be consequences. We cannot predict what will happen to her mind, or to the ZyraHFY people. Zane took a deep breath. The choice was before him. He could try to use the device to change Vera's fate, to give her the chance to remember their love and their shared history. But there was no guarantee that it would work. And if it failed, the consequences could be catastrophic. Still, Zane knew that he couldn't just walk away. He had made a promise to Vera, a promise that he would always be there for her, and if there was even a chance that he could free her from this curse, he would take it. The weight of the decision pressed down on him. But Zane felt more certain than ever. No matter the cost, he would do whatever it took to help Vera remember. The decision had been made. Zane couldn't go back now. The device that Kira had shown him, the one that could alter the very fabric of Vera's memory, was in his hands. It was an ancient relic, and despite the risks, Zane knew that he had to try. There was no other way to break the cycle that kept her trapped, unable to remember the life they had shared. The love he had for her, his unwavering dedication, drove him forward, no matter what consequences lay ahead. The days following his decision were tense. Zane spent hours in his quarters, studying the device, trying to understand how it worked. It wasn't just a matter of pressing a button or flipping a switch. This was ancient ZyraHFY technology, far beyond anything he had ever encountered. It was more than just a tool. It was a key to unlocking something powerful, something that could change the fate of Vera and her people. But how? And at what cost? The ZyraHFY royal court was in an uproar. As word of Zane's discovery spread, whispers filled the palace halls. The council feared that if the memory cycle were broken, the very structure of ZyraHFY society would collapse. Vera's memory loss was not just a personal burden. It was the foundation of everything the ZyraHFY had built. If she were to remember everything, if she were to break free of her cycle, they believed the consequences would be devastating. It wasn't just about the princess. It was about the entire future of their people. Zane knew this, and he understood the stakes. But his heart refused to accept the idea of leaving Vera to live a life of forgetfulness. She deserved more. She deserved to know the truth, to remember the moments they had shared, to know the depth of the love that had been building between them over the decades. But it seemed like the more he tried to help, the more the ZyraHFY people pushed back. Their fear was palpable, and with every attempt Zane made to convince them that Vera's future could be different, they grew more resistant. "Do you understand the danger you're bringing?" the head of the royal council, Ardell, asked him one afternoon. "The prophecy is not just a myth, Zane. It is a law. It's what has kept our civilization from falling into chaos. If the princess remembers, everything will change. Everything will fall apart." Zane stood across from Ardell, his eyes hard and unyielding. He knew the stakes, and yet he couldn't back down. "I understand the prophecy," he said quietly, "but I also understand that Vera deserves to live her life freely. She deserves to have memories that don't disappear, to have a future where she can truly be who she is. How can you ask me to turn my back on her?" Ardell's gaze softened for a moment, but only for a moment. "You don't know what you're asking. We've lived with this for centuries. It's not just about Vera. It's about the survival of our entire race." Zane knew that Ardell wasn't lying. The ZyraHFY had lived with this cycle of memory loss for generations, and it had kept them from facing the harsh realities of their history. But Zane couldn't ignore the fact that their survival was based on a lie, on a system that forced people to forget everything. He couldn't accept that it was right to let someone, especially someone like Veyra, live in such a limited existence. No matter the consequences, he had to try. The days passed in a blur of meetings, conversations, and mounting tension. Zane found himself more and more isolated as the royal court turned against him. Some whispered that he was a traitor, others that he was delusional, but he couldn't let their fears stop him. As he walked through the palace halls, he felt their eyes on him, watching, judging. The whispers followed him, but he ignored them. He had made his choice. He found Veyra in the royal gardens one evening, standing by the fountain, her long silver hair shimmering in the fading light of the twin moons. She was staring at the water, lost in thought, her expression distant. Zane approached her slowly, not wanting to startle her, but also knowing that this was the moment. This was the moment when he had to decide whether or not to use the device. "Princess," Zane said gently. Veyra turned to face him, her eyes lighting up with that familiar warmth, though it was always brief before the cycle began anew. "Zane," she said, her voice soft and melodic, "it's good to see you again. I must admit I don't recall when we last spoke, but I am glad we are able to meet once more." Zane's heart tightened in his chest. Her words were kind, but they cut deep. She didn't remember him. She didn't remember anything. "I wish you could remember," Zane said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I wish you could see how much we've shared." Veyra smiled, though there was a hint of sadness in her eyes. "I know I must have shared many things with you, Zane. You seem familiar to me, like someone I should know. But I don't. I'm sorry." Zane nodded, his throat tightening. He could feel the weight of her words and the weight of the decision he was about to make. He couldn't walk away. He couldn't leave her like this, trapped in a world where she would always forget. "Veyra," he said, stepping closer to her. "There's a way. There's a way for you to remember." She looked at him, confused. "What do you mean?" Zane's hands trembled as he reached into his pocket and pulled out the device Kira had given him. It glowed softly in his hand, a symbol of both hope and fear. Veyra's eyes widened as she looked at the object. "What is that?" she asked, her voice filled with curiosity. "It's a device that can change the cycle," Zane explained. "It can make you remember everything, but it's dangerous. It could change everything about your life, your people, your future. If we do this, there's no going back." Veyra took a step back, her eyes clouded with doubt. "I don't understand. Why would you want to risk so much? If it's truly as dangerous as you say, why not leave it all as it is?" Zane's heart ached at her words. "Because I can't stand to watch you forget me again. I can't stand to watch you live a life where you don't remember the love we've shared, the history we've built together."
You deserve more than that, Veyra. You deserve to live freely.
Tears filled her eyes as she looked at him. "But what if it's too much? What if I can't handle it?" Zane stepped closer, taking her hands in his. "You won't be alone. I'll be here, no matter what happens. I will be here." Veyra stared at him for a long moment, her gaze uncertain. But then, slowly, she nodded. "Okay, I trust you, Zane. Do it!" And with those words, Zane activated the device. The air around them seemed to hum with energy as the device glowed brighter. Veyra gasped, her eyes widening as the memories began to flood back. Images, sensations, and emotions rushed through her, a tidal wave of memories she had long forgotten. She trembled, and Zane reached out to steady her. "Veyra, it's okay. I'm here," he whispered, For a long moment there was silence. Then, slowly, Veyra's eyes cleared, and she looked at him with a mixture of confusion and recognition. "I remember," she whispered. But as she spoke, Zane couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change. The future was uncertain, and there was no telling what the consequences would be. Yet, in that moment, he knew one thing for certain. He had given her the chance to remember. And that was all that mattered. The memory came back to her in flashes, bits and pieces of a life she had lived, a love she had felt, and a man she had known for what felt like a lifetime. Veyra blinked, her eyes wide as the images from her past surged through her mind. She could see Zane's face, his smile, his eyes filled with warmth and care. She could hear his voice, calm and comforting, calling her name in the quiet moments they had shared. "I remember," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I remember you." Zane's heart swelled with relief and joy, but a twinge of fear lingered in the back of his mind. The device had worked, but the moment was far from simple. She remembered him, yes, but what else had she remembered? The weight of the past, the years of forgetting, the consequences of this decision were all still unknown. And what of the ZyraHFY people? Their world, their civilization, had been built on the very cycle that he had just shattered. Veyra looked around, her expression filled with confusion. The world seemed to spin around her, as if the memories were pulling her in different directions. Her mind, now full of so many thoughts, was struggling to catch up with the present. What did I do?" she asked, her voice weak. Zane took a deep breath and reached for her hand. "You didn't do anything wrong, Veyra. You've been trapped in a cycle that made you forget everything. I couldn't let that happen anymore. I needed you to remember. We needed you to remember." Veyra's gaze softened as she squeezed his hand. "But the prophecy, the memory cycle, is this going to destroy everything?" Zane swallowed hard. The questions that had haunted him for so long were now laid bare. The prophecy had always been there, lurking in the background of their conversations. If Veyra's memories surpassed the cycle, everything could crumble. The ZyraHFY way of life, their traditions, their very existence. But as he looked into her eyes, he knew that he couldn't live with the idea of leaving her in the dark. She deserved more than that. They both did. "I don't know," Zane admitted softly, "but I know that we can't keep living this way. You deserve to know your past, your future, and the people who love you." Veyra took a shaky breath. "I don't understand. I've always had these gaps in my life, and now I see everything. But how do I carry all this?" Zane smiled gently, his thumb brushing over her hand. "One step at a time, we'll face it together." The air between them was thick with emotion, but also with uncertainty. Veyra had remembered, yes, but the aftermath of that remembering was still unfolding. She was standing at the edge of a new life, a new future, one that was no longer dictated by the cycles of forgetfulness. But what would that mean for her and for the ZyraHFY? For the first time in a long while, Zane felt hope. But it was mixed with fear. Fear of what breaking the cycle might mean for the ZyraHFY people. Fear of the political upheaval that was already beginning to take shape. But despite it all, he knew that they had made the right choice. Even if everything changed, even if it meant facing an uncertain future, it was worth it, because Veyra deserved to live freely, to live with the knowledge of who she was, and to build her future with the people who loved her. Over the next few days, As Veyra continued to recover from the flood of memories, Zane found himself at the center of the storm. The royal court was in an uproar. News of what had happened spread quickly, and the once peaceful palace was now filled with angry voices and heated debates. The counselors and advisors who had once supported Veyra's reign were now questioning everything. They were scared, and who could blame them? The prophecy had been their guiding force for centuries. To challenge it was to risk everything. "We cannot allow this," Ardell, the head of the council, argued fiercely. "This was never meant to happen. The cycle must be restored, or we will lose everything we've worked for. Our people will fall apart. The very foundation of our civilization will be destroyed." Zane stood in the middle of the royal hall, facing Ardell and the other council members. His heart was heavy, but his resolve was stronger than ever. "I understand your fear," he said, his voice steady. "But the cycle isn't what makes your people strong. It's your unity, your ability to grow and change. You can't keep living in the past, hiding behind a tradition that no longer serves you. Veyra is your future. She's the one who can lead your people into a new era. But only if you let her." The council members exchanged uneasy glances. "And if we don't?" one of them asked. Zane met their gaze, his eyes filled with conviction. "Then you will remain in the past, trapped in a cycle that only brings more pain. You will be bound to a prophecy that can't be changed. But you don't have to stay there. Veyra is ready to lead. She's ready to remember." Ardell crossed his arms, his expression hardening. "We'll see what happens," he muttered. "But know this, if this is truly the end of the cycle, then it will be the end of everything." The meeting broke up in chaos, and Zane was left to stand alone in the hall, the weight of the council's resistance heavy on his shoulders. The ZyraHFY people were at a crossroads, and he couldn't help but feel that the path ahead would not be an easy one. But it was the right one, and no matter what, he would stand by Veyra, even if the entire world turned against them. The next few days were tense as the ZyraHFY people began to react to the change. Some were angry, others were confused, but many were curious. The ones who had always believed in the prophecy were the loudest. But there were whispers of hope from others, from those who saw this as an opportunity to break free from the cycle of forgetfulness. For the first time in centuries, the ZyraHFY were questioning their traditions, and that, in itself, was a victory. Veyra, still struggling to fully process the weight of her memories, took her place among the people. She knew that she had a difficult road ahead of her. She had to learn to be a leader in a way she never had before, one that was not bound by the constraints of the past. But she was ready. With Zane by her side, she felt a strength she had never known. She wasn't alone anymore. As the days turned into weeks, the people of Xylothor began to change. The old ways, the old fears began to fade, replaced by a sense of possibility. The memory cycle might have been broken, but in its place was a new beginning, a new future, one where Veyra would lead with strength and wisdom, remembering her past and using it to build a brighter future for her people. Zane knew that there would be challenges ahead. There always were. But for the first time in his life, he truly believed that they could overcome anything. The love they had shared, the bond they had built, had become something stronger than any prophecy. And no matter what the future held, he knew they were ready to face it together. In the end, it wasn't the prophecy or the cycle that defined the ZyraHFY. It was the people themselves, their ability to adapt, to grow, and to choose their own path. And for Veyra, that path was one of freedom, one of remembering who she was and what she could become. Together, Zane and Veyra would build a future that was no longer bound by the past, a future where love, memory, and choice were the guiding forces. and for the first time, the ZyraHFY were truly free.